So welcome to the Not Just Filler podcast. Two bills I'm going to talk about today moving through the legislative process. One, surprise medical billing, and then the other moving through my Judiciary Committee, address confidentiality. So have you ever been to the doctor's office for a procedure, minor or a major procedure, and you have insurance, you have health insurance, you checked with the physician, you said, is everyone in network? They said yes. And then a couple weeks after the procedure, you received a surprise medical bill. Could be $500, could be $2,000, could be $10,000. And it's a shock. Maybe you could pay it, it's fine, but it's still not great. You know, you didn't see this coming. Or maybe this is gonna go into collections, might force you into bankruptcy. And it's a hole in the system. And I think there are a lot of people probably in this room who are helping me film this who have received a surprise medical bill. So I believe it's House Bills 4459, 4460. I was proud to co-sponsor and vote in favor of them in House Health Committee because it is a hole in the law and bad actors have taken advantage of it. I think most physicians do not surprise bill, but I think people decided it's a way they could make money. But it is a hole in the law. It sits in front of Chairman Iden and the Ways and Means Committee here in the House. I think you should call your representative and tell them that you support these bills, because surprise medical bill, no one deserves to see that if you've done everything right and you did your due diligence, you've got your insurance. So that's a common sense fix. Obviously, devil can be in the details, but I think broadly speaking, no one is for surprise billing. So I was proud to vote in support of that. The second piece of legislation deals with address confidentiality. And this is a program I had heard about at the AG's office, but folks were working on it in the legislative process. What this says is if you've been the victim of a crime, domestic violence, whatever it was, and you feel that you are still in danger from the person who perpetrated that crime, you can get your address essentially hid from the public in the Michigan Attorney General's office. And this is a great thing to allow victims to continue living their lives safely and to hide their address from individuals who are looking it up, who are stalking them, perpetrators who are trying to visit them. And this came through my House Judiciary Committee. We voted on the House bills this Tuesday, and we'll vote on the Senate bills soon. So again, it's a small fix, but it will deal with the Attorney General's office and some other state departments. I think it's common sense. It's not going to cost the government a huge amount of money, and it's going to protect victims of crime. So one of these little common sense fixes that I'm very proud about, that I want to tell people about, because people can be very negative about government, and I understand that, but sometimes government does good and has good programs, and this is an example of one of them. Coming up next on the Not Just Filler podcast, we speak with Larry Jerue, who's the sheriff from Clinton County, a friend of mine and a good advocate for law enforcement. Well, we've got a special guest on the Not Just Filler podcast today, and I can't think of somebody more popular in Clinton County than Sheriff Larry Jerue. And so Larry, thanks for coming to the Not Just Filler podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
And Larry's done a wonderful job in the community. They do community outreach, and obviously they work with all the smaller organizations, law enforcement organizations. Tell me about your jail that you have in Clinton County. It's got a good reputation. I know it's viewed as like a state model for how a local jail should be run, but also the challenges you have with mental health and individuals that come in who have mental health issues.
We house, the maximum is 232, and we average about 220 inmates on a daily basis. The difficulty that we run into now, here's a prime example that we have right now, is we have an individual who has been deemed incompetent to stand trial. Was facing criminal charges. The real sad part in the state of our state right now is the fact that there's no place to put these people who are in dire need of community mental health. A jail facility is not the location for them to be, but because there's no beds available currently, he was deemed incompetent about 3 months ago, and we're still waiting on a bed space available where he would go and get the dire help that he needs, and that has to change. You know, years ago when the state hospitals were closed, there are people just put out on the street that really are in dire need of community mental health, but they don't fall into the statute as far as homicidal, suicidal, or indigent. So, but they're in dire need of community mental health.
So your fix, or at least a start to the fix, would be some place to house these
More
individuals.
bed space available for those that have been deemed incompetent to stay on trial, and they would be receiving the daily care that they need. Now, we have community mental health, obviously, that assists us within the jail, but the jail facility is not designed to be that kind of a holding facility.
Sure, and these are corrections officers, not
Absolutely.
mental health trained. Not that they don't all of a sudden become sort of experts now, because they do it all the time.
They get all kinds of training with community. Our community mental health does a very good job in training in our officers in recognizing and seeing those that are in dire need of assistance. But they're not trained to do. That's not. They have 220 people inside that jail that are going to require other attention as opposed to that kind of attention.
Can you talk about this issue with inappropriate photos being texted in the high schools, using the word sexting, and maybe something that you've seen on the ground floor of it, and then I'm going to talk about the legislation that we're working on.
Yeah, and you and I have had several conversations with this, and I greatly want to thank you for what you're doing to help educate the community and make it a law that because what happens right now in the inappropriate photographing and sending those, if you're under the age of 18, that actually falls into the category of distribution of child pornography. And what starts out as adolescent curiosity or bantering back and forth between a girl and a boy, and or the infamous double dog dare you type thing to take a photograph, a full frontal photograph of nudity, and then send that, hits all of the elements of distribution of child pornography, which is a 20-year felony.
That's right.
And it carries with it the $50,000 fine for every photograph. When the law was developed, it was for the Larry Nassers of the world, the pedophiles that are out there.
The really bad actors.
The really bad people. It's not for the adolescent curiosity. Now, it's every bit as dangerous, because what'll happen is if somebody takes a photograph and sends it to a person who they're romantically involved with in a relationship, that photograph now is like pulling the trigger on a gun. It's out there. It's gone. You cannot recover it.
Yeah.
And what happens is the perpetrator of that now many times becomes the victim.
Sure.
Because what happens is and the relationship may break up. The person who received it may send it to 5 or 6 of their friends so they can share with what they have, and now they're guilty of child distribution of child pornography. And if you receive it and save it, you are now in possession of child pornography, which is a 7-year felony, and it's a $20,000 fine for each one.
And it doesn't really match up.
It doesn't. It
was written for the bad actors, and it doesn't match up.
So, it truly was.
Sheriff brought this issue to me along with the prosecutors at the start of when I entered the House, and we're working on some legislation that should drop in the next couple weeks, allowing law enforcement to really work on this, to deal with the really bad actors, because there's a difference between the individual who sends one photo, makes a mistake, they talk to him, or the person picks up some sort of school misconduct, and the difference between a 20-year felony. So just something that allows law enforcement to talk to the really bad actors and say, we can charge you with a low-level misdemeanor instead of going straight to this 20-year felony, which would be impossible or very difficult to convict
on. And it
on.
really is helpful, too, because, along with that, one of the things that I would like to see is, even if it was decriminalized and made a civil infraction for those that are under the age of 18, and make it a graduating crime.
Yes. Talk to us about your work in the community. I would say in Clinton County, we love our law enforcement.
Yes.
We work easily with law enforcement. Just talk a little bit about what you guys do.
I think, in our community, and communities all across the state of Michigan, you see this, is where, law enforcement has to take ownership in the community of which they serve. And I think that by doing that, that means being actively involved in civic organizations like the Kiwanis Club, for example.
Great.
I belong to the Kiwanis Club, the Lions Club. These are great civic organizations that allow for us as law enforcement to really have a good reaction with the community. We can kind of put our fingers on the pulse of what is important for that particular group. For example, us in the Kiwanis Club, children are our number one asset.
Yeah.
We have to protect them and we have to work with them. And we're very active in the Kiwanis Club in doing so throughout our communities. And it works at both the school level. We have our deputies will stop in. We have 22 schools within the county, and we'll stop in just about every day, just to stop in and say hello at the office.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
So the kids can see and interact with law enforcement. We have a school liaison officer that I've assigned specifically to the schools, but we also have, not just that face. We want to have all the faces of those that are working stop by and see the kids. And so I think that's, another strong aspect is taking stock in your community, owning it, and being proud of it, and being part of it. And same with the churches. We work very actively with the churches as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember growing up in Ovid, cop would drive by, you wave.
Right.
Everybody waves, and in a positive manner, with all five fingers, like you would say.
Yeah.
And so I think you guys get that, and I think you've built that trust. You do a great job on Facebook, too.
Yes, our Facebook page is really, Bath Township has a very funny Facebook page.
They're very humorous.
They're very humorous, and we certainly wouldn't want to compete with that. What we like to do is get, and they do as well, but what we like to do is get out informational things that are, events that are happening within the community, whether it's a National Night Out program or whether it's, something that we're doing. Traffic, we'll get out and say, please avoid the area.
Really
For example,
helpful.
when we had the plane crash, that tragic plane crash here not too long ago. Having people avoid the areas is something that's really important.
Guys, Larry Jerue, Sheriff, Clinton County, just a spectacular guy, wonderful law enforcement officer, protects our community, very transparent, very open. I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
And I got to say, since I got elected, I bounce ideas off Larry all the time. It's remarkably helpful to know what's going on in the county. And in law enforcement too. So, Sheriff, thanks again. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about farms and farming, the ag industry, CAFOs. Maybe you've seen some of my Facebook posts where I talk about the Deagle rules that are really going to come down heavily and burden CAFOs. And we did an op-ed, we sent it out to everybody. I mean, when you see the importance of farming and ag in the state of Michigan, you have to be an advocate for farmers and for the ag industry. It's too important, and it's not just these CAFO rules which go to CAFOs, and maybe there's 300 of them in the state of Michigan. CAFOs work with smaller farms, who work with smaller farms, who work with individuals, who work with Greenstone, and then they lead to you having affordable goods and groceries. And so if you hurt CAFOs and you go after them, it's going to cycle down, and we have to be realistic about that. Yes, it's a permitting process, and maybe people don't know about it, but the cascading effect is a tremendous one. And when you go after good acting farms who have been following rules that they've been told these are rules for a long time, and then you add an excessive burden that's going to push some of them out of business, that's gonna hurt everybody down the process. It's going to raise costs on fruits and vegetables and meat, which hammers low-income folks who really have to think about every single penny that they spend at the grocery store or shopping. So I just feel like we need to have an open conversation about supporting farms, supporting ag, and this isn't a Republican or Democrat thing. This is if you serve in the legislature, you should know the importance of farms, of CAFOs, on the state of Michigan. And so I'm an advocate. I've been making a big deal about it, and I hope other legislators do too. And if you're a farmer or in the ag industry, you need to start reaching out. as loudly as possible. Maybe there's a thought, well, we can't do anything, it's a rulemaking process, or it's permitting, and you should advocate. It's too important. I appreciate you watching the Filler podcast. I hope you enjoyed. I've got another guest, of course, Claire, Snacks Filler, and this is when she was 3 months old, and I was out knocking doors, and it's just, why do we do this? Why do we come to work and represent others? It's for our families, it's for our communities. So just really proud of this podcast and proud to represent you, and I hope you keep tuning in.